our little panel called Crisis as a Chance. My name is Raisa Siivola. I work with the Jazz Finland organization in Finland. And I would like to thank, firstly, Deutsche Jazzunion for having us here, giving us the opportunity to talk here. And so let's get straight to the point that the COVID pandemic has not only affected the health and economy, but also we as nations have fallen back on the climate fight and other United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as well. And many artists in Europe are struggling to make ends meet with their music due to the effects of the pandemic. But at the same time, there's a growing need or demand for them to incorporate sustainability skills to their working practices. So, Dr. Raima Folka, you at the Goethe Institute are running a pilot project called A Touring Green Sustainable Music Projects in Europe, which aims to, and I quote, support professional artists in their in developing concepts for sustainable travel in music and implementing them within the framework of resource-efficient music journey. Isn't it enough that the artists just make art and tour?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lisa. Thanks for the introduction and thank you for having me on the panel here as a representative of the Goethe Institute, the German Cultural Institute. And, well, yes, we are, in fact, well, it's a topic that concerns everyone, personally as as individuals, but also as organizations. And I think that the idea behind this project that we're sort of test ballooning at the moment is actually to empower artists and give them a chance to do things differently, in a sense that I think we all feel the need to change things, but not all of us have the means and the tools to do that. And we as an organization would like to see ourselves as facilitators. We want to help people do things that they might be able to do on their own accord. And of course, art in itself is very important in its transformative qualities, also in creating awareness. But then on the other hand, of course, we also need to do things better and differently. And that mightn't be possible by an in and of itself. That might need some support, and that's where we come in with this project.
Do you have any concrete examples of the projects that have been applied for the support?
Well, we have. I mean, mainly what people are saying. Well, we'd like to. It's obviously at this stage confined to Europe, and it's people are saying, well, I'd like to cycle somewhere, go somewhere on a bicycle, or I'd like to walk. There's even an artist who said, I'm going to do everything on foot. And it involves a lot of preparation, because if you slow things down to that extent, obviously you need a much higher level of organization, because you need to figure out, what the timings are, the dates are, where people perform. And so it's also it's a sort of process for us to evaluate how do we want to do these things in the future, and under what specific parameters can we enable touring and musical exchange in a new time.
Is there a reason why the support system is for artists and not the venues, or is there a philosophy behind it, or?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, it's a very good point at the moment, because we usually directly deal with artists and they can apply as artists to us at this stage. But I'll certainly take that up as a suggestion and idea. I think at this stage, because all of us and many of my fellow panelists can probably shed some light into their various fields of work. I think we're looking for solutions, and that involves trial and error. So it's a trial and error process.
Perfect, thank you. So what about Athena Kontos? You're a member of the German Jazz Union sustainability team, but you're also a touring artist. So how do you feel about dragging your double bass on a train or a bicycle?
Well, I don't mind carrying the bass on the train. Also, driving a car is very tiring, and time in a car is actually dead. On a train I can work. It's actually, I think, the best way to travel by train for musicians. And sometimes I feel about the like the conditions where we do these things is I even get a glimpse of how it would be to travel in a wheelchair. Like it's actually like kind of unacceptable conditions that you have when you need an elevator, when you need space for your stuff. I think there's a much place for improvement, and also when I think about like sustainability in these things, like it's not only ecological sustainability, it's like really doing things together and as a society, evolve as a society actually. I think there's so much room, and that's also where we as artists have impact actually to help people connect.
Can you give us some examples on what you are doing as an artist, or what you're doing at the German Jazzunion?
Yeah, in our group at the German Jazzunion, we gather information and try to make them accessible for the members. We have created like concert contract that includes sustainability things like about the traveling, the accommodation, the catering, and also sustainable catering and tech rider. And we try to speak to jazz venues about their like emissions, and there's some programs that help venues reduce their emissions. We have tried to communicate that. That's what we do with the group.
And as an artist?
And as an artist, I try to make everything with a train. We have done, with one band of mine, we have done a Scandinavian tour by train and bus, like taking more days, sleeping on some couches for like, okay, we made it to Copenhagen, let's stay here. Like something like that. And trying to have a vegetarian and regional and biological catering, speak to the venues, ask for these things, trying to avoid buying stuff when we're on the road, like take our bottles and our food and not buying the stuff that is offered on train stations, which obviously is not good anyway. So, that's what we try to do as musicians. Yeah.
Do you think it requires more time or effort?
It's about habit building, I think. Sometimes, some things yes, but these things that I just talked about is more like, you have to drink on the way, so it's just about, a lot of sustainability things that we can change very easily. Habit building is not easy, but everybody, I think, can think about where their habits could be more sustainable in quite an easy way.
Thank you. What about Lars Tvar Jensen? You work at the Jazz Denmark, Danish jazz organization. And you have a lot of projects that involve sustainability, right?
Yeah, a lot. Oh, that sounds like big. But I think one of the most important ones that we have is called the Nordic Jazz Comets. Just before the pandemic started, we actually tried to, I think, an extension of what Reimer was talking about. We were working with the organizers, because I think they are a big part of this too when we talk about sustainability, especially when we talk about touring. So we try to organize a network. Actually, we have a network now of Nordic organizers and festivals. And then we tried actually with the Nordic Jazz Comets, which is a showcase program for young Nordic bands. Try to build a tour for them to make a best practice book for bands and promoters, how to actually work environmentally better in touring. But what the pandemic also learned us actually is the need for these networks actually. We knew that, I think, beforehand, but I think after this, we need to bring people closer together to make this work. I mean, it's easy to just point the fingers at the artists saying, "Oh, you need to travel green," but we need to take the other parts into consideration because it's time demanding to go by train rather than just fly in and stay there. So we, also in Denmark, we try to build these regional networks of promoters, so you can actually maybe build better tours that makes more sense actually time-wise. We've also implemented it not directly as a thing in our our support system, where we talk. You can get support for traveling abroad from Denmark for transport, but you can get it for one show or you can get it for a tour. And we always look at better at people go far to do more concerts. So we always like encourage them to do more tours. If you go to China, for instance, that's a long way to travel. Of course, there can be a need to go to a certain thing, but we always encourage them to also make different things happening while they're there. So it's not just a fly in and fly out, which, I mean, environmentally doesn't make sense really. So these are some of the things that we try to implement as sort of best practices. It's not sort of forced upon, but it's something that we try to encourage. So sort of like talking about changing the habits of how people think. And we as an organization also try to do that in our own projects. I mean, always thinking how do we get from A to B and how many people are we sending and do we need to travel for these meetings? The pandemic taught us that you can actually do meetings online instead of going to London or Berlin to have meetings. So, yeah.
And of course, that means when you have a network of clubs or something, that means more gigs for the touring artists as well.
Hopefully, yes. But yeah, it does. And that's what we also try to encourage. But that's a different topic, really. I mean, making it easier for bands to do more shows in each country, actually, and travel. Yeah, to get more out of it in the backlash of, of the pandemic.
Perfect, thank you. So it seems to be like a lot of projects and networks and all of that. So how is it? Paul Jarrett, you're a guitar player, composer,
yes,
and you also have some projects and networks, or?
Yes. So I'm a musician. I'm French. I'm based in Paris, and I think it has a lot to do with what kind of level of decisions we can make. At first, as individuals, of course, as an artist, as a musician. As Athena said, we try to avoid the plastic bottles and we try to take the train, eating less meat. But it's pretty ridiculous comparing of the emergency situation, actually. So I think we have to try to make some decisions and to reach another level. And in France, we work a lot with collectives. As musicians, we organize ourselves with collectives because we're not freelance musicians, and it's a special system in France. And I'm part of a collective called Pégase et l'Hélicon. And so we are 6 band leaders and a whole bunch of different bands. And it's a great tool for us to get support. We organize our own festival and blah, blah, blah. But it's a great tool to meet and think together and to brainstorm about this kind of topic too, because we care a lot about this. And so we have a green charter, and we want to send it to the venues and festivals we're playing in with some suggestions. And of course, we as musicians, we're trying to do our best on our side. And but it's always very hard because it's a struggle. We can make some hard decisions, like not to travel too far, and trying. That's what I'm trying to do actually with my own bands, trying to tour in Europe instead of flying to Japan or China or India. But it's really a pain, and it's really a hard decision because as artists we need to play abroad and for our career, but also for an artistic and maybe deeper reasons, and to meet some people there, to play our music there, and to meet some musicians there, and to be able to play with them and to collaborate across borders. It's very, very important. And now since some months we know what happens within Europe, and I think to play together across borders is very, very important, more than ever. And so yeah, I mean it's really a struggle between our own responsibilities as musicians and as a collective, and the artistic need to play abroad and to travel for our music. It's very tricky. So with this collective, we are also part of a federation called Grand Format in France, which is a federation of large ensembles and collectives. And Grand Format is great because it's more official, just one more musicians collective, and it's a great tool to be in contact with the Ministry of Culture and to trying to get involved in the decisions they can make, and trying to lobby at our very low level in some way, but trying to do our the best in our own level as musicians, but trying to get involved in to have a stronger voice. And the collective and the federation Grand Format are some ways, I think.
Earlier, we discussed a bit about sustainability or sustainable development being political in France, particularly. Can you show us some light on that?
Yes, France is a lot about strikes and and demonstrations. We're pretty good at this. I think it has to reach the political level at some point. If we want not just avoid the plastic bottles on stage, there's an absolute emergency situation, and there has to be some political actions, I think. And that's why I was talking about having a stronger and reach a wider level. And it has to become politic at some point. Unfortunately, because I'm a musician, I'm an artist, and I want to play my guitar and to play my music. But we have some responsibilities as well. And I have 2 young kids, and I'm pretty worrying about the state of the world.
Do you think that in your countries you should have more incentives to become more sustainable in your line of work, and what kind of incentives should there be? Can you, Raima, go first?
Thanks, Risa. Yeah, I think, obviously there's always more. You can always do more. I think generally there's a relatively high level of awareness, but of course within a certain comfort zone. I think once you leave the comfort zone, it's a different story. I think of people. But then, having said that, obviously we still have the luxury of being able to choose. We can make a conscious decision. But a lot of people, I would say most people in the world, especially in the southern hemisphere, they don't have the luxury of that choice. And that's a bit difficult, I think. Also, if we talk about touring and musical exchange, and speaking as from an organization that works in 90 countries with 142 institutes in 90 countries. Of course, one of our main aims is to bring people together and to enable exchange. And of course, if we say, well, we don't want to travel anymore, then of course people from the global south might say, well, that's okay for you, but I mean, I'd like to travel too, and I need to be able to present myself in Europe, even though I live in South Africa or in Southeast Asia, and it's very difficult for us to not to come across as if we are making decisions for others. So I think it's important to balance the two, and to have some sort of cultural sensitivity. I do think that jazz, specifically as a music form, really lends itself to exchange. It's probably the most it's the art form, the musical art form, the form of musical expression, which has the lowest threshold for any kind of generational intercultural exchange. So it's a very, very large common denominator, and I think we need to try and sort of salvage that through all these crises, and try and understand what we can enable rather than the limit. That's really important. I think that's the big challenge in this situation, because we tend to, I think, often we tend to think a lot from our perspective, and it's very important to open our minds to other perspectives.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And also the pandemic has also amplified the social inequalities as well. So do you think, Athena, that music or music making could help with the intercultural dialogue, or how do you see the social side of social sustainability as an artist?
Yes, I'm very convinced that we can. We have a great tool for intercultural dialogue, because music is a language in itself. It's obvious, but yes, it's what I think I said before. I think we live in a quite disconnected world, and also to be able to think about sustainability, and also to think about next generations, and you need to feel a connectedness, like we're part of one thing, we're in this together. And I think artists have a great, like the moment of the concert is really like an energetic, very special moment, and you really the audience, they link their own experiences and feelings and emotions to what you present on the stage. So it's a moment where really community is happening, and there is like a moment of connectedness. And I think it's like very, very important thing in our society to get the courage and the reasons for like changing some things, and to feel a part of. Yeah, it's
so you really see the chance.
Yes.
In the middle.
Yes,
middle of a crisis.
Yes, I do.
What about Paul?
I think same than Athena. We are artists as musicians, and artists have a social importance in the whole society, I guess. It's not about stopping playing music, of course. No. We have that responsibility to making our art on stage and playing music for people, and trying to reach, I think, a wider audience. I mean, not in terms of economy, but in terms of reach actual people, and not only the jazz fans. I think it's very important, and we all involved a lot to play like in school or high schools, and to play music with some kids or for kids, and I think it means a lot for them. I hope we're trying to do our best, we have that responsibility for them to. It's not about making them loving our music or not, but getting them to know what different kind of art and expressions are possible. And I think it's always very rich for them to discover this. Yeah.
Can you also make a living out of those, like?
All of those, what do you mean?
Of the kind of like social concerts. Is there a model that you can actually get
of
paid?
course, it's kind of teaching actually, but we are musicians, we're artists, we're not teachers. I mean, so some other of us, of course, are teaching, but it's a whole other job. But as performers, musicians playing on stage, I think we have a different role, and to when we are talking to these kids and playing with them. So yes, we are getting paid for this, of course, because it's part of the job, and a job has to be paid.
Exactly. What about during the pandemic, for example? Have you found new ways to earn with your music, like different than from touring or concerts?
Actually, no. No, and I'm sorry about this. I'm really, and it's only about me, but I'm not into. I've been playing for streamed concerts with no audience, and it was really a pain. Really, I'm not into this at all. No, so I have no solutions, and I hate meetings on Zoom. Really, I do. And but sometimes it's necessary, and if it can avoid some travels, of course we have to do it. But like playing music, to me, there's a physical connection with the audience and the people and the other musicians, of course. So no, it was I tried to grow some vegetables in my garden.
What about Lars? On the organizational level, have you found new ways to, or new digital platforms, or have you found new stuff during the pandemic?
New stuff. Yeah, we tried actually for a short moment to do like online concerts, but actually the thing was that we during the pandemic we sort of made some, we called it backyard concerts, because people weren't allowed to gather, but instead we did concerts in the backyard. So all the people living in the houses, they could see the concerts from the living room, and they would also be streamed online, which gave the musicians some money to play. So we could actually sort of give some money to the musicians that weren't making any money at that time. But I'm so glad we're back to live concerts. I totally agree with you. We've learned that online concerts might not be the way for artists in the future. It's an add-on, but not the essential parts of things. But I'm so glad actually picking up what you said about being more than just an artist, actually, but also being a teacher. And we in Jazz Denmark have some projects actually where we try to help like the social injustice things, not injustice, but social issues. At the Nordic Jazz Comets this year, and actually also next year, we try to like make the musicians that take part see how they can actually help other people's with their music, interacting with, for instance, asylum seekers, going out playing music for people who have like coming from war areas, people who are drug addicts. How can music help people that are like in the low end of society, and not just always think about you as an artist, but also actually as a person with a sort of, you can actually give something back. So we run some projects. We have like a project called Improv for Asylum Kids, which actually takes part at asylum centers where these amazing musicians go out and just play music with the kids who are coming from Syria and all these bad places, and it's so joyful. And I think that's one of the things that we can bring on as an organization also, not just having musicians. Of course, you need to be an artist, you are an artist, but you can also do so much more. We have this jazz camp for girls, which makes girls improvise music, do improvised music, and hopefully get more girls to like be musicians throughout time. So that's a responsibility we have as an organization as well, to like build the future for future musicians. I forgot to add, actually, talking about the Nordic Jazz Comets, if anybody in the audience is interested in the results of our green touring, we actually did a book on it, so you can actually just contact Riza or me if you want to read it, and there's like a best practice way of how to maybe make a sustainable touring life, and enough with the ads.
Thank you, Lars. Yes. So, Athena, how do you feel about the digital transformation other than streaming? Like, do you think that there has to be like a human connection with music, or have you discovered any digital platforms during the pandemic, or digital tools or ways to earn money?
No. I think I don't know, for the German musicians. I think the money that we got in the pandemic was really from fundings, which is also a topic that I think that all this money that's given out should be also linked to some sustainability requirements. That would be a great thing if we all would think together about how to spend that state money sustainably. But the digital, I think actually it's also a big thing that we have to think about our habits with the digital world, because it's a big emission maker, really very, very big, like email, social media and streaming. We have to really think about our time online, because it's a big, there's a lot of emissions coming out from that, and there's not enough knowledge. I think like one email is really making emissions. So also in this business where it's also a lot about communication, and people have to connect and they have to present their music, and we have to present ourselves on social media and everything, but maybe really more, it's too much emissions.
But to take you up on the contract part or the funder part, do you think that there should be like a condition, like a precondition for like sustainable practices when you apply for money?
Yes, I think if maybe you get funding for making a CD and then releasing it and have all the promotion, and you have the posters and the flyers and everything, yes, of course there should be some rules, and also of course it's more expensive to print a poster on a sustainable paper. Okay, this has to be considered in the funding, but yes, of course, that would be great and also necessary.
So basically, do you think that if we as a jazz industry in Europe, for example, if we would adopt certain, like the EG and screenwriter policy or something, that we would all adopt it, then we could make a difference as an industry? Or do you think that the funders should do the rule set on how to tour, for example?
Yeah, everybody. We really have to work together at this point. Like everybody has to put their knowledge in, because it's very complex. It's really about knowledge. How can we make things work? It's really like the artists, the venues, the organizers, the funders, and the organizations. They all have to put their knowledge in, so we can find solutions that work for everybody and for for everybody. So both.
So next one goes directly to Raima. Why don't we have sustainability conditions in the applications?
That's something we're also obviously working on. I think it's difficult, the conditions, and as I mentioned before, I think the main challenge really is that we're in an extremely privileged position here in Europe. So if we, the infrastructure we have, the digital infrastructure, the traveling infrastructure, the venue infrastructure is so dense that if we all decided not to travel anymore, I mean, in our individual places where we live, it wouldn't, life would go on. Musical life would also continue in Cologne, Berlin, Munich, Bremen, yeah? But in other parts of the world, it wouldn't. It would come to a stop. So I think the big difficulty is not to become isolationist and retreat to kind of very privileged islands and then cut off any kind of dialogue. And I think music is a tool for social interaction, a platform for social interaction, but it is also a means of discovering new ways of doing things. So I think we probably at some point we will have to come to some kind of I don't know, set of rules where we say, well, we're not going to fund the projects anymore that are one-off intercontinental flights. But we're not at that point yet because we're still looking for solutions. It's an ongoing process, but I think there's a growing awareness on all parts, on the musician side, on our side, on the venue side. But it's really, really important to underline and emphasize the aspect of enabling things rather than preventing them.
So, Paul, how do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, it's a long process, of course, and but we have an emergency situation. But it's all about this. I mean, yeah, it's very, very tricky to have some new tools to be able to travel and to keep on playing, and it's very struggling. Yes, of course. And but I want to say something else about artists, because Athena and myself, we are quite small actually in terms of the audience reached by our music, and I think there's a huge responsibility for bigger names, because I'm not sure it's a coincidence Athena and me are sitting here at this table because we care about this. And I wonder about big names like keeping on traveling to play in this festival in Taiwan for one single gig and then going back to the US and traveling to Europe or whatever. And I think, yeah, there is a responsibility to quite big too, and I'm afraid it's always the more fragile and the smaller artists who try to do their best and to take their responsibilities. And maybe we should share these responsibilities with the bigger names too.
How could we do that?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I was talking about getting politic, and maybe we have to do this. And maybe I don't want to force anything to stop playing, of course, but to think about the way we are organizing our careers and our playing. Yeah, it's not about stopping, and we have to try to be constructive and to find some new ways, but not to force people to stop doing things, but to make things differently, I guess.
What about Lars? I can see that you have a solution to you.
I wish I had. I think I would be really, really wealthy by now. But I do agree. I think we need to address this on a even a higher level. I mean, bigger artists. But then again, it goes back to maybe also the organizers. But it's a kind of a catch-22 in this, because of course, bigger festivals, they want the big names, otherwise they don't get the audience, and so it's kind of back and forth. But I think in general, I think the right way is everybody needs to work together, and I think it's also the big festivals that need to think about this. And I know there are a lot of, for instance, Roskilde, which are really important into this, both in terms of gender and environmental stuff. But then again, also we need to, address it on a high level. So maybe don't stop booking the big artists, or maybe just I need to be conscious. No, but it's like I said, it's a catch-22 for everybody, because we need them to go. So I don't have the answer, but I like the idea that we need all together to find the solution that fits everybody. Because I'm not a big fan of putting also restrictions on artists. You cannot do that, because you need to perform your art, and you need to travel, you need to connect and go everywhere. So, like I said, it's unfortunately a long process. We need to take into consideration and but again, it's all about maybe thinking about your habits. I mean, it's about, for instance, talking about meat. I mean, everybody knows you don't have to meat, so maybe stop eating meat once a day or twice a day. I mean, it's all about just scaling down, maybe, so you don't have to on everything. It's not about not flying. It's about thinking about when you fly rather than so you can actually go and think about how you travel. I mean, like I said, we as at our office have during the pandemic it's like kind of like there are eye openers and like saying, okay, maybe we don't need to be there in person and how can we go there? We go by train instead of flying and stuff like that. So I think it's all about the process of changing habits without putting limitations to artists and arts. And we as an organization also need to like fertilize that thought and incorporate that in the way we work, just as you do it when you do. And I really like the Goethe Institute, the project, because I think that's all about also thinking differently. And that's what we need to do. We need to, like we did during the pandemic, really. That made the whole world think differently in how do we interact, how do we get music, how do we, all that kind of stuff. And now that it's, dare I say, over, we need to continue that. We don't need to go back to 2019. We need to continue the process of rethinking ourselves as artists, as organizations, as promoters, as festivals. I think that's. And it's a long road. We need to. It's really far ahead. But I think if we have the goal in sight, we get there quicker. I mean, it's not a thing that we can do overnight, because that's not how the world works. I don't think we can shut down the internet tomorrow, or Spotify for that matter. That's not. It would be nice, but I don't know if it would be nice if we did that.
Very wise words from Lars. So one more round, final round of answers to the question that, because we all know that there are new audiences to be reached with jazz music, and we can do that while touring sustainably or while working in a sustainable manner. But what kind of new audiences could we reach?
Well, yes, we need to reach younger audiences, obviously. In the jazz business, it's quite obvious when you play concerts. And that's why also these things that Paul said, that we, in the teaching and making concerts in schools, it's also like audience building. It's really, it's a big thing, and to have younger and more diverse, really more diverse audiences, and not to be in this bubble of intellectual, like jazz has this label of being very intellectual, but yeah. But actually, just one more small response to what has been said now, because I think actually, yes, we don't need to, we shouldn't cut down things and put limitations on artists and everything. Yes, but as part of the Western world, actually, and with the emergency situation that we have, I think it's actually time that we have to somehow, there has to be a less and a limit to some things, and maybe it's at some point maybe a little bit painful, but I think it doesn't work in this okay, we need some time to develop new habits, and a little bit of I mean, it has to be less. Somehow, somewhere there has to be this
we have to rethink our consumption habits, right?
Yes.
What about Raima? New audiences, can we?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a follow upon what Athena said. I think it really boils down to individual decisions, and the level of decision making is different depending on where we are in our lives and what we do. I mean, and it's happening. I can just say from not from a. I mean, I know of ensembles, large ensembles, specifically an ensemble from Germany got invited for one festival, one night concert in Seville. They said, we're not doing that anymore. The days are over. We're not flying down with the whole ensemble backline for one concert. So if people have the liberty or luxury to make these decisions and maybe make personal sacrifice, I think that's the way forward. As far as audience development is concerned, I think probably I could imagine that, that kind of younger audiences obviously have a different expectation of what improvised music or jazz is, and I think these very rigid genre lines are dissolving, and you can see that here at the concert, the gala concert in yesterday. I think I don't know who went there, but the Canadian gala concert was a really good case in point, because there was a piano trio, and then there was a very, very interesting a singer from Guadeloupe who's living in Quebec, and it was a very interesting contrast. And I thought, this is fascinating, because we will only sustain the audience that we have if we open up and open the borders and the fringes and explore the interfaces between other styles. And that's the way forward, I think, for this type of music.
Perfect, thank you. And Paul and Lars, really quickly, final words. Are there new audiences to be reached with sustainable practice?
I have no perfect reply for this, but I think it's very important to keep and save this diversity in all the different kind of jazz and improvised music existing, and to reach the audience, a younger audience, with all these different kinds of music. I think it's very, very important.
And Lars?
Yeah, I think it's also for younger audiences. I think, I'm not just going to repeat Reimer. I think it's all about maybe also opening up to new inspirations and new areas, new music styles, whatever. But without forgetting the history of where the music comes from, because it's still jazz in a way. So it's in general, I think it's about actually learning younger people to explore music rather than just always think about what's the biggest right now. And so exactly. Not only that, he said not only music, you couldn't hear it, but in all terms of life, really. And that also goes back to maybe the habits that we're talking about, changing minds and stuff like that. Be more open.
Perfect last words for this. Thank you very much for being here and taking part in this panel. And thanks for everybody watching. And we'll be here for like maybe 10 minutes later after this. So if you have any questions about the projects or about anything. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Reza, for moderating too and hosting the session.